There are places on this earth that feel less like geography and more like a warning. We are accustomed to the idea that the world is mapped, tamed, and conquered. We look at satellite imagery and believe that there are no secrets left, no dark corners where the rules of civilization do not apply. But this is a lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. If you drive south from the industrial clamor of New York City, past the refineries and the concrete sprawl, you will eventually hit a silence so profound it feels heavy in your lungs. You will enter a region that defies the logic of the modern United States. It is a vast sandy aquifer covering over 1 million acres of southern New Jersey, known as the Pine Barrens. To the outsider, it is a blur of trees on the way to the Atlantic City coastline. But to those who step out of their cars and walk into the tree line, it is something else entirely. The soil here is acidic and sandy, resembling a prehistoric ocean floor that is unsuitable for traditional agriculture. The water in the winding creeks is stained a deep rusty red by the tannins from the cedar roots, giving the impression that the land itself is bleeding. The trees, stunted pitch pines and pygmy oaks, grow in twisted, agonized shapes, creating a canopy that blocks out the stars and suffocates the sound of the outside world. It is a landscape of isolation, a place where compasses are known to fail and where the silence is not empty, but expectant. For 3 centuries, this forest has been the stage for a haunting that is as persistent as it is terrifying. It is a place where the locals, the Pineys, lock their doors not against thieves, but against something that has stalked their families for 10 generations. To understand the entity that rules these woods, we must first understand the unique psychological weight of the land itself. The Pine Barrens are what folklorists and parapsychologists refer to as a liminal space, a threshold between 2 states of being. Long before the first European boot touched the soil of the New Jersey coast, the Lenape people inhabited this region. They were a culture deeply attuned to the spiritual resonance of the earth, treating nature with a familial reverence. Yet, even they drew a line in the sand when it came to the deep interior of the pines. They hunted on the fringes, they fished the estuaries, but they rarely camped in the heart of the forest. They called this area Popuessing, or the place of the dragon. In their oral traditions, which have been passed down with fearful consistency, they spoke of the Misinga, a spirit guardian of the animals. Still, they also whispered of something else, a biological abomination that was not spirit, but flesh. They described a creature that combined the features of the animals they hunted into a mockery of nature: the wings of a bat, the head of a horse, the claws of a bear. To the Lenape, the Pine Barrens were not just a forest, they were a containment zone for something that should not exist. This indigenous dread set a precedent that would infect every wave of civilization that followed. When the European settlers arrived in the 17th and 18th centuries, they brought with them the arrogance of the Enlightenment. They saw the forest as a resource to be exploited for bog iron, charcoal, and lumber. But the Pine Barrens fought back. The industries failed. The bog iron furnaces went cold. The glassworks shattered. The towns they built, places with names like Ong's Hat and Double Trouble, were abandoned, reclaimed by the creeping vegetation, leaving behind the hollowed-out stone skeletons that still stand in the woods today like monuments to failure. Into this vacuum moved the unwanted of society: British loyalists fleeing the revolution, Hessian deserters, Quakers persecuted for their beliefs, and fugitives escaping the law. These people became the Pineys. Isolated from the developing nation by the density of the swamp, they developed their own dialect, their own culture, and their own superstitions. They lived in a world lit only by fire, surrounded by a darkness that was absolute. In this incubator of solitude and poverty, the folklore of the old world mutated. The fear of the devil was not an abstract theological concept for these people. It was a physical reality that waited just beyond the light of their cabin windows. It was in this atmosphere of social isolation and environmental hostility that the most enduring legend in American history was born. The story of the Leeds family is often recited as a simple ghost story, a bit of colonial theater to scare children. But when one digs into the historical records, the narrative reveals a disturbing convergence of occultism, family trauma, and high strangeness. The year was 1735. The patriarch of the family, Daniel Leeds, was a man of considerable controversy. A publisher of almanacs, he was branded a heretic by the local Quaker establishment for incorporating astrology and occult symbology into his writings. The Leeds family was ostracized, pushed to the margins of society, labeled as monsters by their pious neighbors. It is here, at Leeds Point, on a desolate stretch of land battered by the Atlantic winds, that the legend finds its flashpoint. Mother Leeds, the matriarch, found herself pregnant with her 13th child. In the 18th century, the number 13 was not just unlucky, it was a mark of doom. Destitute, exhausted by the burden of raising a large family in a hovel and facing a brutal winter, she is said to have reached a breaking point. During a labor that dragged on for days while a thunderstorm raged outside, she looked up at the ceiling of her shack and screamed a curse that would echo for 300 years. "Let this one be a devil." The room was filled with midwives and neighbors huddled against the cold. According to the legend, the child was born a seemingly normal human boy. But as the umbilical cord was cut, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew heavy and smelled of sulfur and wet fur. The infant ceased its crying and began to change. The metamorphosis described in the lore is horrific in its anatomical precision. The witnesses claimed the child's bones cracked and lengthened with a sickening wet sound. The jaw distended, pushing out into a horse-like muzzle filled with jagged teeth. The spine arched and twisted. From the shoulder blades, leathery wings erupted, tearing through the skin. The legs snapped and reshaped themselves into the backward-bending legs of a crane, ending in cloven hooves. The creature, now a bipedal nightmare standing nearly 3 feet tall, thrashed around the room, attacking its own mother and the midwives before scrambling up the chimney. It emerged onto the roof, let out a high-pitched metallic scream that shattered the night and flew into the Pine Barrens. It did not die in the storm. It grew. And it remembered. If this story had remained a local legend, we would not be discussing it today. Folklore usually fades with the arrival of electricity and the automobile. But the Jersey Devil is unique in the annals of cryptozoology because it has a phase 2, a period of mass interaction that moved the creature from the realm of myth to the realm of public safety crisis. This period is known to historians as the phenomenal week of January 1909. This was not a series of isolated sightings by drunkards in the woods. It was a mass hysteria event that gripped the entire Delaware Valley, involving thousands of witnesses, police departments, and civil authorities. It began on Sunday, January 16th, when residents of Woodbury, New Jersey, woke to find strange tracks in the snow. These were not the paw prints of a bear or a dog. They were hoof prints, similar to a horse, but clearly bipedal, one foot placed directly in front of the other. The stride was impossible, measuring huge distances between steps. But the most terrifying aspect was where the tracks were found. They crossed open fields, stopped at fences, and continued on the other side without breaking the snow, as if the creature had hopped over. They were found in enclosed courtyards with no entry or exit points. They were found on the roofs of houses, traversing the shingles from one side to the other. By Tuesday of that week, the creature itself was being seen. The descriptions were remarkably consistent across different towns and demographics. Witnesses described a creature roughly 3 to 4 feet tall, with a kangaroo-like body, a horse's head, bat wings, and a long forked tail. In Haddon Heights, a trolley car filled with passengers was effectively held hostage when the creature began buzzing the vehicle, diving at the windows, and screeching. The panic was so severe that the driver nearly derailed the tram trying to escape. In Burlington, police officers reported seeing the beast perched on a building. When they approached, it hissed and took flight, heading straight up into the darkness. In Bristol, Pennsylvania, the town's police officer, James Sackville, had a confrontation. He saw the creature standing on the bank of the canal, its eyes glowing in the moonlight. Sackville, a trained marksman, drew his revolver and fired. He later testified that he heard the bullet strike the creature's hide with a sound like hitting a tight drum or a piece of wet canvas. The creature did not bleed. It simply let out a terrible scream and flew off towards the river. The panic of 1909 was absolute. The Philadelphia Zoo offered a $10,000 reward for the creature's capture, a staggering sum at the time. Mills in the Pine Barrens closed because workers refused to walk through the woods to get to their shifts. Schools had record low attendance as parents kept their children indoors behind locked shutters. Armed posse roamed the woods, firing at shadows. It was a week where the veneer of 20th century civilization cracked and the primal fear of the dark returned. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, the phenomenal week ended. The creature retreated into the deep sanctuary of the pines, leaving a traumatized populace in its wake. But it did not leave. It simply went back to being a shadow. As we move into the modern era, the nature of the encounter shifts. We leave behind the mass hysteria of 1909 and enter the era of the specific, high-credibility witness. The files of the New Jersey Forest Fire Service and the state police contain reports that are difficult to dismiss. These are not reports from tourists, but from men whose careers depend on their observation skills. One of the most chilling accounts comes from the files of Chief Ranger Alan McFarland in 1980. McFarland was called to a farm bordering the Wharton State Forest to investigate a livestock disturbance. In his years as a ranger, McFarland had seen every type of predation imaginable: stray dogs, coyotes, foxes. What he found at that farm defied all of it. A pen of pigs had been slaughtered in the night, but it was the methodology of the kill that stopped him cold. In a typical animal attack, there is a struggle. The earth is torn up, blood is sprayed, and the carcass is ravaged for meat. These pigs were dead, but their bodies were intact. There were no bite marks on the legs or flanks. Instead, each animal had a single surgical wound at the base of the skull. The predator had extracted the brains of the livestock, leaving the rest of the meat untouched. McFarland stood in that silent pen, looking at the carcasses, and realized he was looking at the work of something intelligent. No animal in the Northeast kills for the brain alone. It was a detail that suggested a ritual or a nutritional need that biology cannot explain. However, the encounters are not always lethal to livestock. Sometimes they are deeply psychological confrontations with humans. In 1993, Forest Ranger John Irwin experienced an event that he would later describe as spiritual violation. Irwin was on patrol along the Mullica River, a dark, serpentine waterway that cuts through the heart of the forest. It is a place of deep history and deeper shadows. Driving his patrol truck down a narrow sand road, Irwin saw a shape blocking his path. His brain, seeking a rational explanation, told him it was a deer. But as he slowed the vehicle, the silhouette changed. It didn't run. It stood up. The creature rose on its hind legs to a height of over 6 feet, towering over the hood of the truck. Irwin slammed on the brakes, his headlights bathing the entity in harsh, white light. He described a creature covered in matted black fur that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Its head was long and skeletal, more like a horse's skull wrapped in dried skin than a living animal. Long, thin horns curved back from its brow. But it was the stillness that terrified him. A wild animal acts on instinct. It flees from loud noises and bright lights. This thing did not flee. It stood its ground. It turned its head and looked directly through the windshield, locking eyes with Irwin. He described the eyes as glowing with a dull, internal red luminescence, not a reflection, but a light source. For what felt like an eternity, man and monster stared at each other. Irwin felt a wave of primal dread, a sense that he was in the presence of something ancient and hateful. Then, with a casual dismissal, the creature turned and walked, it did not run, into the dense cedar swamp. It moved with the arrogance of a king in its own court. Irwin, a man who had spent his life in the woods, drove away shaking, his worldview shattered. While the rangers have the protection of their vehicles and weapons, civilians who wander into the Pine Barrens are often far more vulnerable. The forest has a way of isolating groups, of separating them from the safety of the known world. There is a specific location in the Barrens known as the Blue Hole. It is a perfectly round, crystal-clear body of water in the middle of the woods. The water is inexplicably cold, even in the height of summer, and locals claim it is bottomless. It is a place associated with drownings and suicides, a place where the Jersey Devil is said to drink. In the summer of 1973, not far from this ominous landmark, a young woman named Susan and her group of friends experienced the Oz effect. They had parked their cars in a clearing for a party, creating a circle of light with their headlights. They were loud, they were happy, and they were oblivious. Then, the sound died. The music from the car radio cut to static. The crickets stopped chirping. The wind died in the trees. The silence was sudden and absolute, a physical pressure on the eardrums. Then came the footsteps, heavy bipedal crunches on the dry pine needles, circling the perimeter of the light. They were being hunted. The group huddled together, the party forgotten, scanning the tree line. When the creature stepped into the light, it was standing next to Susan's car. She described a beast about 4 feet tall, but with wings that were folded against its back like a cape. As the group screamed, the creature unfurled those wings, huge leathery membranes that spanned 10 feet. With a single powerful flap, it launched itself vertically into the air, the downdraft knocking over beer cans and slamming car doors. The group scrambled into their vehicles, tires spinning in the sand, and fled. They didn't stop driving until they reached the neon lights of a diner on the highway. They had looked into the face of the folklore, and it had looked back. But perhaps the most harrowing narrative, the one that serves as the ultimate warning to anyone thinking of camping in these woods, occurred in the summer of 2003. This account involves 4 young men, Michael, Greg, Max, and Frank. They were recent college graduates, fit, confident, and crucially armed. They carried hunting rifles and sidearms, believing that a gun makes you the apex predator. They were wrong. They hiked miles into the interior, setting up camp in a remote clearing far from the designated trails. The first sign that they were not welcome came in the afternoon. While gathering wood, Frank looked up and saw a plastic bag tied high in the branches of a pitch pine. Climbing up to retrieve it, he found it contained the fresh, mutilated remains of a raccoon. The animal had been crushed and torn open. It was a warning. It was a territory marker. Disturbed but unwilling to admit fear, they stayed. Hours later, they found a possum in a similar state, left on a stump near their tents. The creature was leaving them gifts. As night fell, the true horror began. The Pine Barrens at night is a place of absolute darkness. The canopy is so thick that it blocks the moon. As the men sat by their fire, the silence was shattered by a scream. Witnesses to the Jersey Devil often struggle to describe the sound. It is not a roar. It is a high-pitched metallic shriek, like a woman screaming through a distorted amplifier, mixed with the sound of tearing metal. It echoed from the darkness, freezing the blood in their veins. Then, the eyes appeared. Just beyond the ring of firelight, floating 7 feet in the air, 2 red orbs watched them. Then came a low, vibrating growl that they could feel in their chests. Panic took over. They raised their rifles and fired into the dark, the muzzle flashes illuminating the twisted trees for split seconds. The eyes vanished, but the creature did not leave. It spent the entire night circling their camp. They could hear its snapping branches, stomping the ground, breathing heavily. It was toying with them. They sat back to back, weapons drawn, terrified, waiting for an attack that never came. It wanted them to be afraid. When the sun finally rose, they found the hoofprints in the sand, massive, deep impressions that circled their tents in a perfect ring. They packed up immediately, intent on hiking back to the highway. But the Pine Barrens has a way of confusing the mind. They checked their compasses, they checked their maps, but the woods seemed to shift. The trails they had just walked vanished. Landmarks disappeared. They were walking in circles, trapped in a topographical loop. As they hiked, they began to find more dead animals, a rabbit, a hawk, a deer, all mutilated, laid out on the path like breadcrumbs. The creature was hurting them. It was leading them deeper. As the sun began to set on their second day, the realization hit them. They were going to spend another night in the dark with this thing. The second night was violent. The screaming returned, closer now, deafening. Then, a new sound. The slow, rhythmic whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of massive wings beating the air above the treetops. It was hunting from the sky. The men doused their lights and hid in the brush, pressing their faces into the dirt, listening to the heavy thuds of something landing nearby. They lay there for hours, too terrified to breathe. Finally, spotting the distant glow of streetlights from a highway, they made a break for it. They ran through the brush, tearing their clothes, driven by pure adrenaline. As they neared the road, Max swung his flashlight beam to the left. There, standing by a tree, was the Jersey Devil. It was fully revealed, a gaunt skeletal nightmare standing on two legs, its horse-like head stripped of flesh, its wings folded against its back. It hissed at them, exposing rows of yellow teeth. The men burst onto the highway, screaming for help. A police car, responding to a separate call, came speeding around the bend. The cruiser swerved, slamming into a dark shape on the road. The creature had tried to cut them off. The officers jumped out, guns drawn, expecting to see a deer. Instead, the thing on the asphalt scrambled up. It didn't look injured. It looked angry. It dropped to all fours and galloped back into the tree line with a speed that blurred in the headlights. The police officers, pale and shaken, did not pursue. They told the boys to get in the car. They drove them to the town line and told them in no uncertain terms to never speak of what they saw. It was a cover-up in real time, a confirmation that the authorities know exactly what is in those woods, and they are powerless to stop it. So, what are we dealing with? The skeptical mind demands a classification. Biologists have tried to pin the Jersey Devil on the sandhill crane. The size fits the wingspan, but a crane weighs 10 pounds and has a beak, not a muzzle full of teeth. It cannot withstand a collision with a police car. Others suggest the hammerhead bat, a grotesque fruit bat from Africa. But that species lives in the tropics. It would freeze to death in a New Jersey winter. Furthermore, no bat can stand on its hind legs and stare a man in the eye. The biological explanations simply do not fit the data. This forces us to consider the uncomfortable possibilities. The Lenape believed this land was a portal. In the world of theoretical physics and high strangeness research, there's a concept known as a window area, a location where the magnetic fields of the Earth create a thinning of the veil between dimensions. Could the Jersey Devil be an interdimensional entity? A creature that doesn't just live in the woods, but phases into them? This would explain why it appears and disappears so suddenly, why it leaves tracks that end in the middle of open fields, and why the landscape itself seems to warp and change during encounters. It is not hiding behind a tree, it is slipping out of our reality. Or perhaps the truth is even more disturbing. Perhaps it is a tulpa, a thought form. For 300 years, millions of people have feared this creature. We have told stories about it, poured our psychic energy into the idea of it. In Tibetan mysticism, it is believed that enough focused thought can manifest a physical entity. Have we, through centuries of collective fear, birthed this monster? Is the Jersey Devil a physical manifestation of the isolation and dread that the Pine Barrens naturally evokes? Is it a mirror reflecting our own terror back at us? Whatever the answer, whether it is a prehistoric survivor, a genetic mutant, a demon born of a curse, or a ghost from another dimension, the reality remains the same. The Pine Barrens are not empty. There is a presence there that claims the land as its own. It has outlasted the indigenous tribes, the colonial settlers, the industrialists, and the skeptics. It watches from the tree line as the cars rush by on the Garden State Parkway, oblivious to the ancient horror just beyond the guardrail. It is a reminder that despite our technology, our cities, and our arrogance, we do not own the night. So, I leave you with this final warning. The Pine Barrens are beautiful in their own desolate way. They offer a solitude that is hard to find in the modern world. But that solitude comes with a price. If you decide to visit, stay on the marked trails. Do not go out at night. Keep your windows rolled up. And if you are ever hiking in the deep woods and you find the forest suddenly goes quiet, if the crickets stop chirping and the wind dies down, do not stop to investigate. Do not look up into the trees to see what is blocking the stars. Turn around, walk back the way you came, and do not run, for only prey runs. And whatever you do, never, ever enter the Pine Barrens alone. Thank you for joining me on this descent into the unknown. If you made it this far, You are clearly one of the brave ones. If you want to support the channel and ensure we can continue to shine a light on the darkest corners of our world, please make sure you are subscribed to Midnight Monologues. But turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. And I want to hear from you. Have you ever been to the Pine Barrens? Have you ever felt that heavy silence? Leave your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't watching you.